Hello, this is old Mr. Kent of MrKent.com, and I thought, well, I'm going to fly down into the Queen Creek Wash and see if I can spot any critters. I've done this with my Mavic 2 Zoom, and so I thought, well, I'll try it with my Mavic Air 2. But before we do that, what I want to do is show you what I experimented with after being helped by so many people's comments, and using the map that's actually built into the drone's app. And so that authorization zone that I ran into a couple of weeks ago, I wish I would have remembered that this app has a map on it that would have told me exactly what I was wondering about if I just would have remembered it was there. So I clicked out in the blue area, and sure enough, there it tells me that it's a restricted zone. And I just wish I would have remembered. By the way, I had a comment from somebody that said that may be because of the wildfires that have been taking place during the summer in the area over by the Superstition Mountain. So anyway, I appreciate the help, and I thank you for those of you who were willing to get me straightened out on this map. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to fly down. I'm flying to the western end of the Queen Creek Wash. I've done this many times. Usually I fly with the sun to my back, but I thought maybe I could catch some critters off guard if I fly with the sun, fly into the sun, because maybe they can't see me coming so well, because I would be less, I wouldn't show up as much in the sun. So we'll see if this works, and we'll see if we can spot some critters. So as you can see, I'm going to drop down here, and we're going to drop somewhere between 15 and 20 feet below the takeoff level. So we're dropping quite a ways down. And we'll just see what we can do to spot any critters. While I'm doing that, I'll tell you a story about my Cessna 170, the day that it was flying backwards. And so if you're more than 40, you may or may not, you may or may not remember the eruption from Mount St. Helens on May 18th of 1980. So that's quite a while ago. But it was a big deal back then because up to that point there had not been a volcano erupt in the United States. So that was like a first. I'm sorry about my throat. Excuse me. So anyway, that was a big deal, and the FAA, because it was such a big deal, there was a lot of airplane traffic and helicopter traffic going around the mountain after the fact, because people wanted to take pictures and get videos and movies and stuff like that. So the FAA set up some rules that you had to fly counterclockwise so that the pilot could be on the side of the looking at the volcano, and that way planes wouldn't be going the wrong way and they wouldn't run into each other. So that was the rules, and that was something that was, like I said, it was a really big deal back then. So where I was going to church, we had this there's a critter. I don't know if I can't tell by just looking at it. It's either a quail, or if it's got the really long tail feather, then it's a roadrunner. But it could be just a duck. I can't really tell by looking at it here. So anyway, we did find one. But there was this lady at our church who had a really rare dog, and she needed to get it. We were in southeastern Washington, in Pasco, Washington. I've mentioned that before. And she needed to go to a place a few miles south of Portland, Oregon. And to get there, she asked me if I would fly her down to that area. And so there's an airstrip down there called Aurora State Airstrip. It's not very big, but that was in the area where where we needed to go in order to take her dogs down, or her dog or whatever, to get it. I don't remember if she had one or two dogs, but anyway, I think she just had one. Anyway, to get it worked on, whatever needed to be done. Maybe some kind of operation or something. It's been too long ago, over 40 years ago. So anyway, so we loaded up in the plane on one particular day, and there was high winds coming from the west, and of course we had to fly towards the west, and so I knew we were gonna have a real strong headwind. So we took off early in the morning, and it was quite early in the morning, and took off from Pasco and started heading. By the way, Kennewick and Pasco are right next to each other if you look at the map, so the Google Earth. Anyway, so we took off, and I could tell right away that we were in for a long flight, because when we would go over a freeway, the cars were going, they were going about the same speed as we were. We were flying at about 100 miles an hour, but I think we had about a 40-mile-an-hour headwind, and so the cars were in some cases, the guys going fast, they were passing us up. So that was kind of interesting, and I knew that we would make it. It just was going to be a longer trip. So as we flew north of Mount Adams, and Mount Adams isn't a super high mountain, but if you've ever noticed, a lot of times around the top of a mountain there's some clouds, and that's because of the air rising. If there's a wind blowing or a breeze, the air rises up the windward side, and the water condenses and it creates a cloud. So that day, as we flew by Mount Adams, we flew on the northern side of it. I looked out, and sure enough, there was a cloud. There was clouds over it, but those clouds, it's a big mountain, and so those clouds were actually flying the opposite direction as we were. It's like they were moving over the top of the mountain, and visually, it's hard to explain. But normally the clouds don't move over the top of the mountain, but these were being blown over the top. So I knew that we had a real strong headwind. And so when we got close to Mount St. Helens, those are birds. So I don't know. That seemed like it had a long tail. Maybe they're road runners. Well, anyway, as we got close to the mountain, I knew the rules. I knew I had to go counterclockwise, which means I would have had to turn north and swing around on the leeward side of the mountain, which was then just a big hole in the ground and the top of the mountain. And so as I started heading that direction, I got to thinking, the wind's going to be it's so strong, it's going to be coming up over the top of that ridge, and then swirling. And when it swirls, if depends on how much wind there is and how big the swirls are, we could be in for a rough ride, and maybe even get thrown down to a lower altitude or whatever. So I decided, I'm going to break the rules, and I'm going to go around clockwise, and that way we'll be on the windward side, and we won't be in any real turbulence. And so as we got closer, she got her camera out. She was snapping pictures out her window, and we, the closer you get, you think you're there, and then you find out that it's a pretty big mountain. And so the closer you get, by the way, here we're dropping down. We're almost, I think we're about 20 feet below the takeoff altitude, close to that anyway. And so, and I'm not seeing many critters, and I don't think you are either, so this wasn't the best idea, but back to the story. So as we finally got close enough to the mountain, I mean, it was huge. It was about 10,000 feet at the ridge, and we had to get up to about 13,000 feet to be able to look down on it for her to get pictures. And so we weren't moving very fast because of the headwind. And as I swung southwest to go around the edge of the rim there, and just turned southwest, and we're going along. and she's snapping pictures, and I'm trying to stay close to the ridge, but not too close. And so then finally we're coming around on the south side of the mountain, and I look down, and we are flying backwards. Remember, we had a southwest wind, and because of the wind rising up towards the edge of the crater, it was increasing, and the trees were coming out from in front of us, and we were also getting blown closer to the ridge. So at that point in time, I didn't panic. I just decided we're going to get out of here. So I made about a 90-degree turn to the south, nosed the plane down, gave it full throttle, and we lost altitude, and I gained speed, and we did get out of there. So I was glad to get out of there, but we still had the heavy headwind. So, and we continued on, and we turned down. We went south to the airport, and we had to go around the Portland airport area. So we got down there, and when we got close, I turned on the radio to the frequency of the Aurora State field, and that way I could hear what traffic was going on. Now here, the reason that I raised the gimbal up is because I was looking at the screen. I couldn't even see the drone, so I was just looking at the screen to see what we were coming close to, and if we could find any critters. And so I really didn't have any idea where the drone was. So I'm familiar enough that if I look up at the ridge, at the edge, I can kind of tell where we're located. And we sure aren't seeing any critters, so I might do this again coming from the other direction. And I may not have gotten started early enough because the sun's been up for a while, and a lot of times the little critters start running around just as the sun is coming up. Okay, so where was? Oh yeah, okay, so we're headed towards Aurora State Airport, and it's like I said, it's not a big airport, and I got the radio on, and I'm listening, and then here comes this announcement to all aircraft in the area. It went something like this: the Cessna 150 that crashed on the field the wreckage has now been removed from the area, and the field is open again, and pilots are clear to land. Okay, so I thought that the wind's coming real strong from the west, and that field basically is north-south. So whatever happened to that Cessna 150, he was trying to do a crosswind landing, and crosswind landings are tricky, but the stronger the wind, the more difficult it is. So apparently they had some kind of an accident, and I never found out what it was, but I was glad to hear that the field was clear. So we kept flying and kept getting closer and closer, and as we got to where I could see the field, then I radioed the FBO, and I told them that we were Cessna 170 and we were going to come in and land from the north, which because the wind was coming from the southwest, that was the wisest thing to do. So we came in, and let me explain something about a tail dragger, because my 170 was a tail dragger. With a regular airplane, when you land, it wants to steer, it wants to go straight. But with a tail dragger, when you land, if you've ever been to the grocery store and pushed one of those carts backwards, and the front wheels are, they swivel. Well, if you push it backwards, well, then they want to swivel around and turn it around to go frontwards. And that's kind of what a tail dragger plane does. When you land, you got to be real careful, because it wants to turn around and put the swiveling wheel in the front, just like a grocery cart. So that makes it a whole lot more difficult when you're coming in to land with a tail dragger. So on that particular, oh, by the way, and there's two ways to land a tail dragger. There's a 3-point landing, which if you got a nice calm day, and you just bring it down and keep pulling the throttle back, and you get closer, and you keep the nose up, and then finally a perfect 3-point landing is where the tail wheel just touches just a fraction of a second before the main gear. And so that's a 3-point landing. And then they also have what's called a wheel landing. A wheel landing is when you come in at a little higher speed and you trim the plane so that the nose doesn't go up. It's level, and as you drop in altitude, then you just slowly. Oh, by the way, this path that I'm following, in a previous video, I mentioned that I came down this path last spring with my grandson and granddaughter, and down at the end of the path back there behind us now, we played in the mud, and we had a really good time. So anyway, a wheel landing is when you come in, and then as soon as those wheels touch the ground, real gently, just the front wheels, you keep the tail wheel up, then you trim it to hold that plane on the ground until you can slow it down, and then it's much easier to let the tail wheel come down, and it doesn't necessarily want to go backwards. So I came in that day, and we landed. It was tricky, but we landed, and so she got to take her dog wherever she had to take it, and I waited at the airport. And then finally, when it was time to, when she came back and she was ready to go home, well, it was starting to get dark, but it was still windy, very windy, and so we loaded up the dog and everything, and taxied to the would be the eastern. Let's see, that's anyway, to the same end of the runway that we came in on, and I guess that would be the northern end. And as we were waiting to take off, there was a twin-engine plane that came in and landed, and of course he was doing a crosswind landing, and it was interesting because it's the first time I've ever seen a plane land. And normally, if he's going from your right to your left, you're going to look at the left side of the fuselage. But in this case, it was so windy that when he touched down, I could see down the right side of the fuselage. That's how crooked the wind made him go. So anyway, there's a critter up there behind that bush if you look really careful. Oh, that's me. Anyway, so we took off and without incident and climbed up, and we actually pretty much followed the Columbia River back home, even though it was dark, and it was still a good way to go, a good path. And so we followed the river, and one interesting thing that happened on the way, never had this happen before, probably will never again, but it was dark. The only thing we could see was the instrument lights. And, of course, any lights outside the window on the ground. But we're up 7,000 or 8,000 feet. And we're going along, and all of a sudden, I don't know if it was a satellite that crashed or if it was a meteorite, but this bright light, I mean, it lit up the cabin of the plane like it was daytime. And as it came crashing down right in front of us, I'm sure it was 100 miles away, but it was like it was right in front of us, and it lit up the plane, and it was green. So I don't know if it was because of what the satellite was made out of or something, but it was a bright green light, and it was only there for a few seconds, and then it got dark again. So anyway, long story short, I flew backwards that day, and we got some nice pictures of Mount St. Helens, and she gave me some copies, and I've still got them somewhere around because they were printouts back then. But I want to thank you for watching and listening, and God bless you.